Hi, I'm Shannon Lenz, your spiritual fitness coach. Today, we pick up our study of Acts in chapter 23, verses 12 through 35, in which we see the providence of God at work in Paul's situation. Remember that Paul went to Jerusalem, where the Jewish religious leaders incited a mob against him. He was saved from the mob by the Roman authorities, but the Romans didn't know what to do with him. They kept him in custody, but they didn't have formal charges to bring against him. The Roman tribune had attempted to have the Sanhedrin hear Paul's case, but that proved to be another disaster when the Pharisees and the Sadducees started violently fighting amongst themselves. For Paul's own safety, the tribune had to return him to the barracks. But the Lord stood by his side and told him that Paul was going to testify about him in Rome. Verse 12 starts off with even more bad news for Paul. When it was day, the Jews made a plot and bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. There were more than 40 who made this conspiracy. They went to the chief priests and the elders and said, "We have strictly bound ourselves by an oath to taste no food till we have killed Paul. Now, therefore, you, along with the council, give notice to the tribune to bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine his case more exactly. And we are ready to kill him before he comes near." Now, it just so happened that Paul's sister's son heard of the plot. This is the first and only time Scripture gives us any specific information about Paul's family. We know that Paul was from Tarsus, but apparently he had relatives in Jerusalem, or his sister's family just happened to be visiting in town for some reason. Thankfully, Paul was not in prison because formal charges had never been established against him. He was merely in Roman protective custody, so he was able to receive visitors, and his nephew was able to warn him of the evil plan to take his life. After hearing his nephew's report, Paul instructed the guards to take him to Claudius Lysias, the Roman tribune. There, the nephew detailed the plot and cautioned Claudius not to be deceived or persuaded by the Sanhedrin to hand over Saul. Claudius realized that this situation had the potential to be explosive. He also knew that he couldn't keep holding Paul if he couldn't report the actual charges against him. So, Claudius concocted a plan that would solve all of those issues. He'd get Paul safely out of the city, avoid another conflict with the Jews, and pass Paul's case off to his superior, Governor Felix in Caesarea. But he didn't just send Paul off with a couple of Roman soldiers and hope for the best. He sent 470 heavily armed men, which is almost half of his 1,000-man garrison, to escort Paul safely to Caesarea by night. He also sent a letter to Governor Felix explaining the situation. He wrote, "Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency, the Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them when I came upon them with the soldiers and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman citizen. And desiring to know the charge for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their council. I found that he was being accused about questions of their law, but charged with nothing deserving death or imprisonment. And when it was disclosed to me that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers also to state before you what they have against him." Of course, Claudius wasn't completely honest with Felix. He conveniently left out the part where he had thought Paul was an Egyptian rebel, had him bound, and almost flogged him, but the rest of the letter was true. Claudius had taken action that had undoubtedly saved Paul's life. He ensured a greater chance of him receiving a fair hearing, and he had essentially declared Paul innocent of any wrongdoing according to Roman law. Claudius was obviously not perfect, And his motivation to save Paul may have only been to make himself look good. Regardless, we can see the hand of God in Paul's situation. It was God's providential plan that Paul's nephew would overhear the details of the plot. God had also orchestrated the situation to ensure that Paul would be in the protective care of a Roman tribune who was committed to truth and justice. Here's your challenge for today. Pray, asking God to help you notice His providence as you go throughout your day. If you notice His hand in a certain situation, take the opportunity to point out His work in your life to a friend.